For the latest on the Ukrainian president's visit to the U.S. and the crisis in Ukraine, we're joined now by Jorge Benitez. He specializes in NATO and transatlantic relations and European politics. Want to thank you for coming in, especially since you just left an event where he's speaking. Your impressions?
Thank you. I think he made a very positive impression, not just at the Atlantic Council, but in Congress and all the members that he's met here in Washington today.
Powerful speech before Congress today, and you were saying before we went on the broadcast, it's one time where you see Democrats and Republicans uniting.
It was incredibly powerful speech. He was applauded several times. He even had a standing ovation. As I mentioned before, it's the most united I've seen the U.S. Congress in 6 years.
He went to President Obama, to the White House, asking for things, but he's not going to come away with everything he wants, is he?
No, I don't think he's getting as much of the things that he wants from the White House. President Obama is giving him a $46 million package. But after his speech in Congress, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and again in the manifestation of the unity we talked about, unanimously voted to approve the bill by Senator Menendez and Corker to give him $350 million. That's 7 times more military aid than President Obama is pledging.
Wow, very interesting. Let me ask you about Canada, because he was there yesterday. Also very well received. And the Canadian Prime Minister talked about deploying some non-combat troops from the Canadian Army, Navy, Air Force in Eastern Europe. Also talked about millions of dollars for various projects and some military equipment. How do you measure both of these North American countries and how they are responding to his pleas?
I think he's received a very strong response, both from Washington and from Ottawa. Both of our countries have a very large Ukrainian diaspora, and we both feel very closely about the threat to freedom that Ukraine is having through now because of the Russian invasion.
Let me ask you about timing. You would almost think that his planners should get fired because this was not the best time to be up on Capitol Hill or to be in Washington. Seems like this huge vacuum where all anyone's talking about is arming the Syrian moderates. Does that hurt him at all that he's showing up when the news seems to be so focused elsewhere, ISIS?
I don't think it did. I think as you've seen in the news coverage today, by the power of his speech and the fact that he gave it to a joint session of Congress, he really has made a mark, and the statements that he's made and the kind of impression he's made has really been the talk of the town of Washington and international news today.
One of the issues that still seems to percolate out of Ukraine, though, and I want to read a quote here, is corruption. An economist who's advised Ukrainian leaders on economic issues in the past said that the general sense is that corruption is just as bad as before. How can Kiev turn the corner on that?
Directly because of his personal leadership. One of the things that Poroshenko addressed, both in his speech to Congress and tonight at the Atlantic Council, is the problem of corruption. He's not hiding away from this. He's not running away from it. He's dealing with it directly, and he's promised that when he goes back to Kiev, there's already been a bill being debated in Kiev to deal with this corruption problem. So he's definitely trying to give it his best shot.
How do we see this whole thing working its way out in eastern Ukraine? I mean, there's still issues there. There's been fighting even with the ceasefire. How do you see that thing moving forward?
Well, I think Ukraine is facing a lot of challenges. There are a lot of problems that it's dealing with, both economically, politically, and also militarily. But the overall thing is Ukraine has a democratically elected leader now that is trying his best to move his country forward. The big question is, will Putin lay off his military invasion and give Ukraine the space to promote peace and develop itself as a nation?
Jorge Benitez, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.